so terrible.
Yeah, does it?
Wow, thanks.
You got double jointed arms and everything?
Wait, really?
I do, yeah. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I think you have normal arms, normal folk arms. Mer arms.
I don't know what that means.
Alrighty, well, yeah, so let's hit this up. Welcome to the second episode of Born of Steel, a gaming talk show about tabletop and other things relating to gaming, whatever we feel like talking about at the time. My name is Bronzebeard. I am the community leader over at Steelborn Legion, steelborn.com, where we do a lot of tabletop stuff. Definitely join it if you're interested in tabletop adventures like D&D and that. You can follow me at, let's see if it posts here. You can follow me at Steelborn, or the Steelborn at Twitter. We do a lot of posts on there about when we're going live, and just some general other stuff, you know, in terms of like photos and that, like cool videos. I'll be linking on there. And then joining me today is Extraordinary again.
Hello, I'm Extraordinary. I am a member of the Steelborn community, and you can follow me at Twitter, Extraordinary, or whatever that is, hashtag me. I think Drasty said he couldn't hear you.
Oh yeah, I see you just posted that. It's probably from the desktop boosting. Only that one.
I wonder if he can hear me at all.
We can probably hear you a lot because I've boosted the desktop like crazy.
My voice.
Jassy, testing, can you hear me, Jassy? We Dictionary just followed me on Twitter, I'm afraid. We Dictionary. Not too sure if they're in the channel. Yeah, I'm not sure if Drasty can hear me. See my microphone.
Yeah, I'll actually turn on sound, and maybe I'll be able to...
You'll hear yourself echoing. Turning my volume on my mic up.
I just won't breathe while I'm listening to it, it'll be fine.
Okay, so there is actually something on my end that I'm getting from your microphone, and it's like feedback, like going shh. So, I'm not sure what's going on with that. Try talking again for me?
Testing.
Okay, it's just because I had Skype turned up super high. Okay, that should be gone now. However, Jurassic, can you hear me? Let me see. Testing, 1, 2. See if my mic is set correctly too. Maybe I'm on the... No, yeah, microphone is for cracking. Watch Dress, he probably just left. Alrighty, I don't know if they can hear us.
I can hear you. It's kind of low, but I don't know if it's because I think my Chrome's low.
It's probably because of the way I have it set. I'm gonna boost my mic 1. How do you sound on it? Do you sound okay?
The world will slowly burn. The Joker is awesome.
Is it good?
I sound high as a kite, but I mean, I sound like a human. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so Jurassic can
That
hear
might
me
just
now,
be-
apparently. I boosted my mic 1, so hopefully I'm not super loud. The thing is, it's probably super loud. I actually see it going crazy right now. I'm gonna pull my mic down to 80%. I'm gonna keep yours up towards like 90%. And hopefully that'll be good. And again, if this recording ends up being like crazy loud, I am going to just record my audio with Audacity and your audio with something else, and then we'll just put it together in Camtasia later.
Okay, sounds good.
But yeah, so Drasty, just keep tabs on it, I guess, if you're around for the entire show, and then let us know what's going on with the audio, if Extraordinary is too low or I'm too high, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll jump right into our first segment, which is memorable moments. So yeah, I mean, throughout tabletop adventures, most of the time you will have minutes of gameplay, or hours of gameplay, or even weeks and months of gameplay that you'll talk about for probably the entirety of your lifetime about how fun it was. So let's talk about some of those moments that we might have experienced, and if anyone in chat has some moments they want to talk about or bring up, we can talk about those too, or questions, comments, all that kind of stuff. So Extraordinary, you want to start it off?
I knew you'd ask me to.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Memorable moments.
What about that time that you were like a druid and you ran into a basement and there were like a bunch of swords and stuff? What about that?
I mean, nothing. We never find out what happened though. That's the thing.
That's true.
I wandered off into a basement, found a bunch of swords that apparently floated, and during that week, I had plan A, I had plan B, I had contingency A, contingency B, I had oh my god, fuck, plan C. I was ready, I was prepared.
Yeah.
Those swords were gonna get wrecked.
I think I will continue Run to the Core eventually. I don't know if you're going to be around when I continue that or whatever, if you're going to be playing other games with Drasty and that. But yeah, I mean, that was a really cool moment where your character kind of, the floor caved in and you could see down there's like different artifacts and that, different pieces of armor, and then you went around and went down the stairs and went and kind of ran into it.
Let me do the brief story about like before we went into the Paladin place. So like, we started out as a group and we got to this point where we are transporting this vampire to were we transporting him to the Paladins?
Yes, you were bringing a vampire. I believe that Guard Captain Thanos, I think you guys were still talking to him at that time, Guard Captain Thanos had captured a vampire, and instead of him bringing him to the Paladins, you guys decided you were going to take him in the cart and bring him to the Paladins. You were originally going to go through the mine, but I think you took him through the center of the town, or was it the opposite? You were going to take him through the center of town, but then you took him through the mine.
I honestly don't remember whether it was to the center of town or the mine. Either way, he had like a cloak over his head, something like that. But I mean, we took him to the Paladins. We reached the Paladins. Nothing crazy kind of happened in the meantime. I think he was in a coffin, and we had like chained up the coffin, that type of thing. That was his like cell. So we reached the Paladins, and everyone's like all focused about the gate. Like, let's just knock on the gate. And my character saw a path, and she was like, this is a path. And as a like player, I was like, well, the DM made a path for a reason. So my character turned into a wolf, started sniffing along the path, following it, found a bunch of like cultist guys doing some weird ritual against a werewolf. One other person followed me down the path. It was our fighter, and then that left the cleric and what was Absinthe?
Absinthe was a fighter. I think it was he would use two swords or something like that. He was with the vampire though. He was left behind in the wagon, hanging out with that vampire.
Okay, so we had the dual wield fighter and the cleric, kind of at
the gate of Hammerhall.
Yeah, the gate of the Paladin place, Hammerhall. And then I had gone off, seen these cultists messing with this werewolf, which was like tied up. I kind of like sneaked around nearby them. The fighter who had followed me, I think, alerted them or said something, and started fighting them. Me and him basically took them out. I think the cleric came by and did some stuff, and then ran back. Basically, like, while we're fighting these cultists with this werewolf, the other fighter the dual-wield fighter Absinthe was he was unlocking the vampire's cage, breaking the wood or whatever he had to do, and he was like talking to the vampire like, hey man, I can let you go, like I kind of want to be a vampire, like that'd be really cool, I think that'd be awesome. Vampire was like, yeah, sure, whatever, let me go. So Absinthe and this vampire are getting buddy. The cleric, as a player, kind of teleported back, and we were like, all right, no, you're not, you already, he's because he already sort of teleported to the cultists randomly. So we were like, all right, well, we're gonna give Absinthe some time before you like can go teleport back again, so give some Absinthe some time. And then so cleric and Absinthe meet up, and they ended up having this huge fight, this like level 5 cleric versus like an actual vampire who was just like knocking him around. The cleric does some circle around the vampire to keep him in. Absinthe gets out and is like, the vampire bit me, oh man,
he was like kind of happy about it.
This really sucks. Like, oh no, like trying to pretend like he didn't want it. And while that's going on, me and this other fighter, I'm tearing out throats as a wolf. And this other fighter's trying to stop me, and I'm fighting him because my character was kind of like engaged in wolf form, like she was the wolf. So she's going crazy, and then he knocks her out of wolf form, and she's like kind of realizes, all right, I'm back. So that, and then we talked to the werewolf, which was a cool guy. But it was a weird scene because like the party was split, and part of the party was fighting like a full-grown vampire, one of which wanted to be a vampire, so it wasn't helping that much. And the other one who had this like hard-on for, I'm gonna kill this vampire as a level 5 paladin or cleric, whatever he was. And the vampire is just tossing him around, and he managed to like slow the guy down, but the vampire escaped. Absinthe is bit and has vampirism. Me and the fighter get back, and I think we have a cultist that I hadn't killed. I let the werewolf like basically eat one of the bodies of the cultist. It was just interesting.
I remember that I had him kind of weakened from being tortured by the cultists. He was chained down, and that, I mean, for me, more so like even when you guys are building that story, because you guys have as much put into that story as I do in terms of creating Aeor, and I think I call them Aeor and the Moonbathe. Moonbathe sounds kind of funny now that I'm saying it. It kind of sounds like he's like, seductively bathing in the moon or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like that for me is a memorable moment in itself. Like sitting there and creating these NPCs that you guys are going to interact with, especially that character, because I had created him in a previous game that we had played, and he was being tortured as well by the same cultist. So I kind of cut that piece out from the story, brought it to you guys. He was being tortured in a different way. He was hanging from like more of like a cross type structure, almost like chained to that, and it turned out that people from our group, one person had mentioned, and this is what I really like about Dungeons and Dragons, is that or any RP based tabletop game, is when your players mention something, that automatically gives you something that you can decide, hey, maybe I do want to put that in there. So one of my players was like, hey, do I see any of my family members in there or anything? I was like, oh, well, that's probably a good idea. So, and I was like, all right, yes, so you see your mother and your father, or something like that. I was like, you see your mom, you see your dad, they're all hanging up and they're all tortured. And then he like completely as a character went crazy and like started killing these cultists. And another guy found like one of his old brothers or mentors like in there, and so like, how did these guys get them? I don't know. You guys just put them in there by mentioning that. So they had built a whole new story after that. Maybe they wanted to kill the cultists for that reason. They tortured their parents, find out what the cultists were or where they are stationed, and I want to go kill them. And so like those little bits and pieces keep giving me these memorable times at which we've played, because it creates a whole new character when you have a story to go and try to push towards, try to kill the cultists, try to defeat a group of pirates or something that's stealing your loot. just that kind of stuff really resonates with me. And of course, having NPCs die for some reason, I guess I have a Walking Dead type syndrome where I have
you
like
love killing people.
Yeah, main characters like, yeah, these guys are cool. Go hang out with them for like 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and then it's just like, oh, you get a spear through the chest or something, and they just die out of nowhere. And then a new NPC comes in that is eligible for dying. So I mean, I just have a lot of fun with that. I mean, it's like from the arc of when they're starting and who they become to their pinnacle of like what they are. Like, I don't know if did you play when I had the character Garrig, the Pale Cleric, in there at all?
No. I honestly, like, a lot of the names, like, it was
That's
you
why
got through a lot of different characters than us early, which is fine because I'm sure we would have gotten to the point where we like knew them more. But we literally walked into this paladin place. Like, I remembered Aeor just because like it was sort of my character specifically talking to him. Yeah. Also, my character actually cared about him, but honestly, my character didn't care as much about the paladins because it's just like the connection there is very tenuous. But yeah, you threw like 7 or 8 paladins with their own backstories and stuff at us.
Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly. I vaguely remember like the icons and stuff, but not necessarily like their names and things.
Yeah, I mean that was something that I learned after running all of those, the similar type things of the same characters. Is like when I go back into it, just take 1 or 2 of those guys and have you guys actually sit there and talk with them for a while, find out their backstories, maybe go on a couple small missions with them to gain their trust or hate them. I'm realizing after playing Fallout 4 as well, because I've been playing that a lot recently, that kind of helps. You care for people. You have companions that follow you in that game, and you decide whether or not you want them to continue following you based on your actions and that with them. Like, I had the dog following me. I felt bad every time I would be like, no, I don't want you following me anymore because the dog whimpers or whatnot. But yeah, you get other people to follow you. So I think like if I just took one character like Aeorn and you met him in the woods and then you go with Aeorn to kill said cultists that were torturing him, and you do that a couple times and then you take out the cultists, I think that would build more of like a feeling towards one NPC, and then you would actually remember them. Whereas I threw, like you said, like 7 paladins with different backstories and reasons for being there, and then you really didn't get to choose who you want to go follow their story,
Yeah, I think with that situation, Aeorn, like I said, my character cared about him and like felt a kinship with him, just with the, werewolf druid. She had just gone crazy as a wolf, so it made sense to her. Also, she like actually, asked about his backstory and things like that. And you had set up where they would meet the next day because he wanted to know, like, are these paladins like gonna kill me as a werewolf just because I'm a werewolf, or would they help me at all? And that was sort of her information to know. So you created something that I had to do in response to this character, and not just like an interaction. And then when I see them again, there was actually like this sort of time aspect of I gotta leave my party for a minute or whatever to find this guy again. I think with introducing a lot of characters that you want your PCs to interact with, I think it's good to have maybe like 2, maybe even 3, as long as the 3 are fairly diverse. They're not, standard fighter 1, generic fighter 2, and bland fighter 3. They're all gonna, maybe you have just like 3 fairly diverse people, and then maybe you have other characters that you like in the background that you have backstories for, but they're in the background. They're not necessarily involved. They're doing things, maybe they even like bring the characters somewhere and like casually mention their name, but it's not like the PCs are actively being involved with them unless the PCs like decide to. They have these kind of primary NPCs, and then
well, I think
if they go further, they go further. If they don't,
I mean, it happened a lot where I would have the primary NPC, like Garrig, the Pale Cleric, who was one of the primaries. And he would be like, oh, well, so-and-so, come over here and do this. And then people would be like, okay, I want to follow so-and-so and ask him so-and-so's backstory. And then they would get, like, that information. So then they would become almost like a primary NPC. But I definitely understand that I need to pick and choose when people are primary and when people are background characters. Maybe take them away. Don't, like, have them all out there at the same time so you can talk to each one of them. Just have them kind of busy in their own right. Doing generic tasks around the Paladin Hall or whatnot.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Even too, I mean, I don't know how much this ties in, but I'm not sure how much of a hierarchy there was in that order. But in a lot of organizations, there is going to be a hierarchy. And, even if you're like a level 10 adventurer, level 5, you're not necessarily going to be talking to the main squeeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be talking to, someone that's 2 removed from him. And that's your main contact. And then at some point, there's a mission that requires you to be 1 removed from, Mr. I run this organization. And then it creates a progression of an RP progression, essentially, as opposed to, just kind of a mechanical level progression, which I think is interesting to, include and think about too. Like maybe your lowest kind of NPCs are the ones they talk to first. And if they continue on, they can talk to the higher ups and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, I mean that's something that I need to focus more on, is like have those lesser NPCs, because most of my NPCs were like just as important as the last one, because I don't know, I just had that. I guess I had that drive to make them important in my mind, but maybe they shouldn't have been that important. Maybe they should have just been a barkeep or just been a trainee or something, instead of having like, oh, I'm the trainee from this island and this happened to my family and this, that, and the other.
sorry, no, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, just having it was just a little bit much. Also, we didn't get a lot of time in those sessions too. So.
Yeah, just throwing things at people a bit too fast, I think, can really kind of push you away from following an NPC or caring about the NPC. So, definitely a lesson learned.
Yeah, I know one thing from my experience in sort of organizations. I run LMOP. I think I've ran it twice, 3 times total now in that module. There's sort of a progression in that sense. The PCs will meet basically like a wizard who's kind of part of this organization, this criminal organization, and then they defeat him, and then they go on to deal with like a basically a more powerful wizard in the organization. So there's sort of a progression element there as well. For just like a fight progression too, like you beat this guy, but there's a guy behind him that's got a little more muscle behind him. And deals in a slightly different way. Because the first wizard was much more like, I fireball you, and it hurt. That hurts. And the second one was much more like, I come up, I suggest one of the party members, and now one of your party is my ally. That was more the second wizard's MO. So.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, do you have any other memorable moments that you feel you'd like to share, or anything, or any moments that you might know other people have gone through that they've told you about?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's probably quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, there's some. I'll save some. I'm starting like a new campaign too, so hopefully Tuesday when I run that session in the morning. We'll see what happens. I hopefully we'll create some
Which
moments
campaign
there.
are you running?
It's a continuation from LMOP. The party actually TPK'd in LMOP. It was basically a roof came crashing down on all of them as they were chasing this invisible wizard around, trying to nab him, and he basically just was gonna wait, and until they left, but they knew he was invisible, so they were like, well, we'll just wait it out until invisibility wears off. Okay, well, they happened to be in the room that basically had this trigger mechanism to crash it down, and that's what the dude did. And they all went into death saves. One survived with literally 1 hit point. That was how the rolls worked out. Mm-hmm. And the one that survived, the cleric, decided to heal himself and fight the guy instead of spare the dying people. He was also a death cleric, so he could have basically, like, he had the choice to, I can save 2 people and potentially go into death saves myself, or I can just like heal myself and fight the guy. And I mean, I don't know. I tried to elongate it as much as I could. Like I could have just magic missile the last standing guy so many times, but I just kind of played the wizard like inefficiently just to try to give them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it
But,
sounds like he kind of went solo and wanted to be like this big hero in the end or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the mentality of the group from that point was a lot of, let's just get this guy, don't, we'll kind of ignore the mooks and go after the big guy, and once he's done, we'll clean up the trash.
So
and in that
became
situation,
more combat mechanic-y in a sense?
Yeah, definitely more combat mechanic-y. That's one thing I'm kind of struggling with figuring out is creating, I guess, the main guy that isn't so easily just like engaged or just so easily taken out. Maybe I think it's a little difficult to describe, but like with wizards specifically, most people know. Like you run up to a wizard and you just like punch him. He's gonna fall down. He's not gonna get back up because he's
over his robe or something. Yeah.
He's a wizard. He doesn't want to fight you physically. Whether or not he's got a bunch of skeletons around him or not, you just dash past them, take some AOs, and you're right in front of this guy. So it's one thing I'm trying to figure out is to create just more challenging combat encounters that don't necessarily revolve around let's take the guy out that is running the mooks, and then we'll deal with the mooks. So.
Well, I think this kind of. Do you feel it's proper time to move into mechanics? Because we're going to start talking about them.
Yeah,
I got some
definitely.
ideas, of how to do that. So yeah, this is our segment called "Going to the Mechanic." In terms of keeping people, at bay while you're introducing your guy or whatnot, I definitely know kind of what you're talking about. How people just dive right away, and like say you have a wizard that's going to talk to them for a bit, or like actually investigate. You want to like sneak in and like actually see what this guy's doing. Maybe he's like mixing chemicals or something in the background, rather than them just diving in. You like to have something in between them to negate that type of I guess battle hungry sort of thing. Let's see. Oh, you guys are talking about Alan. Okay. But yeah, one thing I'm thinking, wizard type of maybe telepathic, maybe he's able to hold them in a sense, or some sort of traps in there that would hold them, that maybe they need arcana to see. Because was it more of a thing where they would come in and just attack him rather than like kind of talking, or what were you trying to get out of them?
Well, for instance, in one encounter that was also very deadly that I kind of just worked around just to give the guys a chance to survive it, they... Drassi. I would love if you revived Alinar. That'd be great. Alinar was cool. What was it? Oh, they knew they were going to go to this well to fight a necromancer. Like, they... knew ahead of time this is what they're dealing with. So they go, and the fight I had prepared was essentially a bunch of just zombies that they would fight before they even reached the necromancer. The zombies were just milling about, just digging, and then after that they would see the necromancer, and the necromancer had some kind of bulkier guys with him. So they fight the zombies, and they expended way more than I thought they would. I don't know why. But they did. So they did that, and then they go up to the necromancer. And the way I described it was this tower was tiered. There were 3 tiers of it. So the first tier was just literally the zombies, and then they walked up to another tier, and then the last tier was like lightning was flashing down from the sky. Like this necromancer has lightning like slamming down like on top of him and around him, and he's doing something. You don't really know what, but he's doing something. So obviously there's a lot of magic going on. This guy has quite a bit of power, and I had the necromancer like turn to them and start talking to them, and then the immediate response was basically, all right, I guess we're gonna roll initiative. So they rolled, and then just straight attack this guy, and this. It was, yeah. I wanted them to like talk to the guy, and like actually discuss with him at all. But they wanted to just fight, so I just ran the fight, and it was a lot more deadlier than I had thought it would be. But I had also tried to take into account that I assumed that they would try to find out more about the fight, but they didn't. So some things surprised them that honestly they probably would have been aware of if they had taken even 30 seconds, a minute of just talking.
I think that's probably the most prevalent thing that I've seen when it comes to players, and I personally, as a player, like when I've played a game, I can't see from the other perspective in terms of like how you're so battle hungry that you can't sit back and RP, and how, like, when you know about metagaming, and if you do know some information, how you can't like stop yourself from doing that, and have everyone like attack right off the bat without talking or investigating. I really would like to have that, in campaigns as well, and we kind of got towards that in Rotten, to the core a little bit. You were doing it more than other people. I think you're kind of in the same boat as me, of understanding like how not to metagame and RP sense, like talking with people, just sitting down and doing something that's more of what your character would do rather than just, that's a bad guy, we are good guys, we need to take out bad guy. I don't know. I really don't have like I don't think anyone probably has a full-on answer of how to make sure that your characters know, unless like you hit them with something hard, like they attack the Necromancer and they pretty much are dead at that point, and then they have to start a new game. Like you TPK'd your other group for LMLP, because they decided, hey, we're just gonna wait the invisibility out because that's a mechanic, and then they died from that. Like, now you said just continuation that's starting on Tuesday. So do you think, like, now that they've died and they've had that punishment for it, and that you've probably told them you wanted them to talk to him or whatever, do you think that that's going to have an effect on them, or do you think they're going to act very similar?
I think it depends. Like what I wanted to do with this one has be a lot more freeform, and a lot more loose. I'm very mechanic heavy, and that I just like the sense of there is a baseline rule set that we're gonna follow. And because if everything is open, then it's very difficult to have any sort of control or like know what you can and can't do. So I like to kind of use that rule set as a crutch to be like, all right, well, these are the mechanics I'm going to use because they're within the rule set and they're understandable. But I wanted to do a lot more freeform. As far as your question, these guys had died in LMOP. The bard who had gotten a rapier from the necromancer they killed, and with a lot of motifs on it that I described in detail, and were easily the symbols of the three dead. He basically was like, his friends were down. The cleric had got him back up after killing the wizard, and then he was like, "Well, I'll do anything to save my friends." And I was like, "Are you sure?" Because I had said the rapier would like talk to him and be like, "Hey, I'll if you want your friends alive, what do you give me?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'll give anything." All right, well, he raised them as I did, and they were pretty beefy undead. It brought him back alive, and basically the bard ended up killing the cleric, and the bard is like the new kind of bad guy that they'll face initially, because there's a bit of storyline about what. The rapier is kind of like a focus of like an undead god that wants something. So that bard's going to be like the, not necromancer, but the kind of bad guy for the new campaign.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't answer your question. I don't know. I don't know whether these guys will just burn through things or not. There's such a fine line between killing characters and not killing characters, and part of me was bothered by the whole like, we're just gonna wait out the invisibility, because it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah,
really?
Like, as characters, like, did they even know that as their players, like as the characters, would they have known that the invisibility would have ran out at the time, or was that fully metagamed?
It wasn't fully metagamed. Like, from my understanding, like, if you have it in your spell list, you have a sense of what the spell does, right? you might even, the duration, that sort of thing. Like, I'm not going to worry too much about, does your character know the exact duration of invisibility? Like, it was in, I think, the Bard spell list. At least I hope so, because he was the one that said that. But it still was just kind of like, really? I mean, it was just weird. But I mean, the falling ceiling was in the campaign at that time already, and it made sense that this guy, knowing that he can't get out of this room, he's just going to try to take out as many as he can and clean up the rest. And that's what he did. So,
Right,
I mean, he died, but
I just realized that I did not start the recording on OBS again.
You're a champion, Bronze.
I know, right? So we're starting it from this point. We just talked about a bunch of stuff, and I missed that. But hopefully I can download the archive that is on Twitch. I should be able to do that. So, but yeah, it's recording from this point. So now they get to see you smoke a cigarette, I think, which is your second cigarette. So, we'll have to... It's your third?
I'm a chain smoker.
Oh, okay, got it. Let's see what Drasty's saying. Yeah, going to walk that fine death or no death line soon. It's tricky. I have not yet walked the let's kill players because they're being stupid line. I've been like, let's kill a player, and then I've been kind of like, oh, I guess I'll bring you back, because they would cry a lot about it or something. They wouldn't cry about it per se, but they'd be like, you're a new DM, and I think that was a mistake, so you need to bring my character back or else I'm not playing. And then I would kind of bring their character back, and then it kind of happened a couple times, and it became a point where you pretty much were playing a video game in my game because you would revive. I think if I ever run a game again, which I am running the Stillborn Avatar system, so, and that's a little bit different actually. Never mind, I'm not going to use it as an example because that's more video gamey than anything, because you do revive in that. But if I do run a normal D&D 5e game, I will be killing characters permanently. There will be no revives, and you'll have to create a new character, like how old D&D was. It was very punishing, and I think that makes you focus more on your character and makes you a lot more careful, because I would even have like things like infections, where you get stabbed and you get an infected wound and you have to heal it via magic or take the time to actually drain the wound and all this other stuff. Because mechanically, I think that to play one of those games where you're focusing on like ammo consumption and different medical effects or different shelter effects, eating your rations and actually using them. Like, I didn't even use rations in my game. It was like, yeah, you can just get some food here and there. Like, I want to focus on one of those games, and I think death comes real close to that. If you're out of food for a while, if you get your food taken when you're a prisoner, and people want you to starve to death, you can die if you're not careful. Or if you get stabbed and you don't have someone who can heal you around, it might get infected and fester, and you might die from that. So I think if I do run another game, it's going to be more realistic like that, and it might focus more on the mechanics and the rules of real life, as well as what's listed in the player's handbook and that.
Well, let's talk about death as a mechanic, since we're kind of in the mechanic section here. I, for one, I love. I mean, I'm gonna say I don't love it, but I think that should be a very real thing in D&D. I think your character should be threatened. I think people are much more involved in the game when your character is threatened, because you put time into this character. So when people level up and they get to the point where they start getting reincarnate as druids, which is, I think, the first resurrection kind of spell, maybe. And that's like, you come back with all your stats and your mind, but you come back as a different race. So it's like, maybe it's not great for you. Maybe you get a race that doesn't really work with your stats, but like, it's cool RP-wise. And then you get into like resurrections, and the way they do it in D&D is the earlier spell levels of resurrections have this time thing. Like, someone cannot be dead for more than 10 minutes or an hour, otherwise the spell won't work. And then the higher level spells are, they can't have been dead for 2 weeks, and then the last one is just, I will resurrect anyone at any point unless
Unless
like
the body's completely obliterated or something like that.
yeah, unless like a wish spell completely negates them being allowed to resurrect, right? So in your game that you're thinking about, or like you're saying, the next time you'd run a game, you would have death be death. You're dead.
Yeah.
What do you think about either tweaking how the resurrection mechanics work, or simply just not having them at all? Like when you die, you die. You don't get the second, third, fourth chance to come back.
Well, I mean, because like if I was going straight D&D and like using actual D&D rules, I probably would still use them. I do really like reincarnate. I think that's a really cool thing. Like you said, RP wise, you come back as a different race. Maybe you were a dragonborn, and now you're a dwarf or a gnome. I think it's funny sometimes, but it's also like a serious thing where it's like you have family members probably that you've engaged with, and now your body is completely gone and you are a new character, like almost. I mean, but you have the same memories and all that stuff. And I think it also brings you to a different part of the world. I don't know if that's in it. I might just be thinking that that's what's in it. But also, what you mentioned about not having that kind of stuff, I think that would be an interesting game too. To not have some sort of resurrection there, unless it were done by like some sort of deity for your party doing a certain number of deeds or something. Like have some little special fiat there or whatever. That would allow a resurrection to happen. Not something that's easy, something that would be very difficult and cause your characters a lot of pain going through it to get to some sort of hidden altar that's covered in thorns and all this stuff, and you struggle as characters to then get your buddy back, and it's like a one-time use only thing, and it might work type of thing. Of course, you have to think about the whole risk and reward type thing, and also giving players that enough of a reward to have fun during the game, because I was struggling with giving my players a fun game, but also giving them the thing was, it was always me second guessing, I guess, how much of a challenge I was presenting them, but also if it was too challenging to where they would die and I'd have to resurrect them. So I guess to go more towards what you're saying, it would probably be safer for me to still use some of the implements from D&D, but maybe remove some of the other ones or tweak some of the other ones to fit my story a bit better, or run a completely different game with D&D rules, except for omit those resurrection spells and that, and just have someone start a new character rather than reincarnate. It's either use the rules that are in D&D or completely remove them and try my own method of it.
Okay, so for you, it's an either or. You're either going to use the rules as written, or you're going to say, I'm just going to cut out those rules. And
because
we'll
what
play
was
the game without
happening
them.
was I still didn't fully understand all of the spells because I was starting DMing, and I wanted to just get into it and learn it as I was going, because I had players like yourself, like a lot about it. I would play and be like, okay, well, you resurrect. Okay, well, this spell says this, a lot of players would tell me, and this would do that. And then I would learn from that experience. And so it would be a lot of times where my NPCs would be powerful enough to resurrect the players, for one reason or another. And so I was not really using D&D rules. I was kind of going around that. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to just use D&D and actually know the rules and read about it. Or it'd be interesting to just not use those and just kind of go by real life, death and real life infection and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for me, I would probably let the resurrection rules be there, but one thing I had done early in the LMOP game I had run was they had died very early. Someone had died very early, and there was a cleric in the party, and I basically was just like cleric prayed to his god, and his god brought this guy back. And later I was really disappointed in myself because it felt like I forget the term. Not a scapegoat, like DM Fiat a bit, or Deus Ex Machina. And that was where I first realized there was this line I needed to walk between death or no death. What I like is, and what I was going to bring in up until they just TPK'd was that bard who had resurrected, based off the cleric, asking his god to resurrect him, because these guys were level 1, they didn't have access to actual resurrection. In my mind, he was undead. Like that was the initial cost of reviving. And if he had died again and come back, then I would have done other things. But basically, like there should be some cost, like a piece of your soul's missing, or you're less of who you were. And how that would apply mechanically. Basically, if I classified him as an undead, there are creatures that give advantage to undead saving throws and things like that. So yeah, he would get that because he was within the radius of the creature. Sorry, what?
Oh, I was gonna say, so almost like a Frankenstein monster. Like you are a normal person, you die, and then you come back almost like, in a sense, deformed. You might not be physically deformed, but you are undead, and yeah, you're gonna be different than you were before. So people react to you differently. Did people see that undead character and be like, I know that person's undead, or figure it out?
They had talked to a banshee who I thought I had laid it on thick, but based off my players' reactions, they just completely blew by it. Basically, the banshee, the bard was attempting to convince the banshee that, she should move on, yada yada, like kind of this altruistic, I just want to help you move on, find your light. And the banshee looks at him and basically just says, like, who are you to say this to me? You're as dead as I am. You like, you came back into this world, and you are existing here. So, what is the difference? Just because she was a spirit and he was a body, to her there was no difference. So.
And so now, did he know he was undead, or was this something you kept hidden until they met the banshee, and then they kind of said that?
I'm not sure if he ever made that connection. I had also made things like they had met a little girl spirit. They had gone to a town and met a little girl spirit, and I made the point to say that to him she looked real, and to the others she definitely looked like a ghost. Mm-hmm. She was ethereal, and they could see through her. But to him, she was she was like flesh and blood, and that was another thing where I thought I was laying on thick after the banshee encounter. But they sort of just really kind of went by it.
I mean, to not so resurrect a person and then have them resurrected, and all your friends are like, "Cool, you're resurrected, like you're hanging out with us." But then have little hints throughout the world that are showing that person that you are different now. I think that's freaking cool, because as a character, if you're really RPing it and you find these things out, you would react to that like, what? Like, what do you mean I'm just as dead as you? Or what do you mean that she looks real? I mean, did you have them do ability checks at the time to see if this girl was like a certain way, or did you have them just kind of see her?
The way I do that, I mean, I told them, like, this was the difference in their perception, right? I told them as characters, this is what they knew. They didn't know that he saw her as flesh. As players, they did, but I just kind of told them. In terms of perception checks or, like, intelligence checks for people that want to know things, if they ask that they want to know something, I'll figure out a check if I feel like a check is necessary. But otherwise, I just try to lay down some hints. And if they pick up on them, great. If they don't, and I lay it on pretty thick from at least my perspective, then yeah, I don't usually give out free, like, hey, give me an intelligence to see if you know this. Right? I don't usually do that, just because if they don't think of it, if they don't want to know, then that's their kind of choice there. But yeah, I mean, for instance, too, like when I said he would, like, if for whatever reason they were around a Death Knight, all right, Death Knights give advantage to undead on attack rolls and things like that. If they dealt with a Paladin, and the Paladin cast Turn Undead on him, he would make a Wisdom saving throw to not be turned. Like, that's because I basically classified him as undead at that point. So all those things apply, in my mind at least.
That's really cool. I think,
and that would have been crazy. Yeah, I think
that would have been really. I would have liked to have been in that campaign, because that sounds like really engaging in terms of like the thought process of, thinking like, oh, and even the players finding out like, boom, I cast Turn Undead, and then this paladin sees like this friend of his, like, just because it doesn't send them away, like they have to move away from it, they cannot pursue the paladin or something like that.
Yeah, Turn Undead is basically wisdom saving throw. You fail, the undead monster has to just keep running away. If it
So
runs
it's
into like a
fear
wall,
in a sense. So
essentially.
they have to run away. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be crazy to cast that, and then to be like, hey, why, Jim? Why were you running away from me? It's like you find out that he's actually undead, or sense evil. Would he have sensed him? Because he wasn't evil. I guess he was not an evil undead.
One thing about I think you're making the sorry, mistake, I guess, that some people make about the divine sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sensing good and or evil. That's the flavor text, which is how a lot of the things in the PHB are applied. They'll give the flavor text, and then they will tell you this mechanically is what happens. Divine sense would just tell them, this guy's undead, right? Not whether he's good or evil. Because some people in West Marches used to try to use divine sense as I'm going to divine sense every PC's character and find out whether they're evil or not. It's like, no.
I think that is definitely a mistake we were having, and a lot of players were having too, because they were like, oh, I'm going to use divine sense, and then we would all be like, okay, well, what does that do? Oh, well, it does this, it senses good and evil, or whatever. They would read it like that, and so then we would just be like, okay, well, you don't necessarily sense any evil things about, here there's just some NPCs walking around or whatever. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that would need to have been fixed, because that spell kind of became useless at that point, It became boring thinking of it that way.
Yeah, if you go up to every NPC and you're like, hey, what's his alignment?
Yeah, exactly.
Me as a DM, I'd be like, well, I mean, what? I'll tell you if he's an aberration, celestial, undead, fey. He's not any of those.
Yeah.
or
maybe he's all of those.
Or like, yeah, he's undead. Obviously, he's it's a zombie.
Yeah,
whatever.
see flies flying around him or something like that. I mean, maybe an undead's not like that, like a vampire who's like just chalky skin or something, and they just are very shiny in sunlight or whatever it is, moonlight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's freaking cool. Like, I didn't hear, you never told me about that, and that, I think in a game, if I were a player or if I was a DM at that time, that would be something that I'd be excited for the player to find out when they're actually moving through the world, to hear these little hints here and there, and if they didn't catch it, then it was something that was funny to talk about afterwards.
Yeah, and then they face a paladin. Yeah. And the paladin recognizes it and turns undead. Now, like, they're fighting this guy, and he's like, "All right, turn undead." And then the character's like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, why am I running away? Like,
why am I
making a wisdom saving throw?
Because it works on you. Why does it work on me? I mean, I don't know, man. Why does it? I'm telling you, just find out later.
Figure it out. Yeah, see that I got caught in that a lot, where it was like, okay, I would tell them something that was happening, and then they'd be like, well, why is it happening? And then I think that me just trying to push through the game, I think I would explain things when I shouldn't have. I should have just had them guess it. Like, I'm just telling you that this is happening. I've played recently in real life, and it has a completely different feel than the online games. And now, that being said, it's more of like, the people I play with in real life have no clue about D&D, and I really like that, because that allows me to tell them what their characters are doing. So if they're like, yeah, I want to shoot an arrow at that window, instead of them telling me I want to shoot an arrow specifically at that certain pane and it does this or does that, I sit there and I say, well, it does that. It shoots through there. It's going to hit a freaking vase and knock that down the stairs or something. Like, I liked being able to explain that, and I think the next game I play, whether it be online or real life, it's going to continue that same thing. So I will be doing most of the talking in terms of explaining things, which I believe a DM should be doing anyway. And then you are just there as the player to do the RP voice, and then doing the roles and seeing the success of your character. And then if I do ask you little things here and there of how you want to possibly do that, then I can explain it a bit more with your description that you've provided me. But I felt like that was a lot more fun to me, and it also moved the story along a bit more. And what else? It kind of, it didn't build it into my story, but it had the players worrying less about the mechanics of things and more about their players and their characters.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've already transitioned into NPC says what, by the way.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, I mean,
No, it's fine. I was guys, but yeah, I was just gonna mention that as far as transitions. But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, talking about the RP sense of like describing things, you know, with the window pane, like I think it's cool to have PCs say, you know, like I shoot this window pane. I'm going to shoot the middle one, and I mean that's kind of I'm trying to think of an interesting.
It's not a good example, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. You kind of were saying it. Like instead of being like I run up to this dragon and I'm going to cut his throat and I want him to bleed everywhere and this happens and this happens. Like they're just like I just want to run up to that dragon and swing my sword at him and try to slice his throat. Then you leave that to the DM to be like, okay, well you actually run up to him, you swing your sword, it clangs off his his scales. And you realize that the scales might be a bit too hard for your sword to pierce or something like that, you know? What?
Yeah,
Is that not a good example?
No, that's great. I love it. One example, I had Wooda DMing for me, one of our community members, and I was fighting this hag in very desperate straits, and I had just missed like a round of attacks or something, and his explanation of that was more just, this woman dances around you as if she's playing with you. Which honestly, this thing, it was a scary fight.
Yeah.
But that was a that was a nice RP aspect and made me as a player and me as a character I you do not play with me. No, I will crush you. But yeah, there was definitely like describing things. I think letting people describe what they want to do is great. As much as they want. But if they're like, I mean, I grabbed this guy and I slit his throat and he's dead, and you're like, all right, do your dagger attack or whatever, and he hits and he does like X amount of damage, but it's like, well, the guy's not dead, so. Basically, you can say it like, all right, so you grab this guy and you stab at his throat, and he's able to like knock the blade away enough that it like just cuts right across his cheek or right across like, his shoulder and his clavicle, and he's bleeding there, but he's you didn't like cut his throat in one hit or something.
Yeah, I think that I've let players take a bit more of the control when I did online gaming. I would be worried about their time talking, I guess, on TeamSpeak. I'd be like, okay, well, this happens, and then I would want them to talk a bit more because maybe they're too quiet. I think in real life you can gauge someone a bit more if they're having fun still while sitting silently, versus TeamSpeak, where it's like you're not sure what their reaction is or if they're just ignoring you the whole time you're doing this. I do still think it's a lot of fun to play online and with TeamSpeak and everything because that's what we're all about. And plus, being worldwide, I mean, it's kind of hard to play real life worldwide, But yeah, I mean, to gauge people in real life, I think it's a bit easier than TeamSpeak. So I think that when I start a new game, if I do start a new game, I'm going to talk more than the players and let them know beforehand that, hey, look, I'm going to be describing things a good bit, so I will be talking a lot, and we'll just move along from there, and hopefully they have fun with that,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I thought you described a lot in our game, and as a player and as a DM, I try to, let DMs describe stuff and not kind of like interfere with that. And it bothers me when, people kind of rush in, or they're just like, all right, monologue's over, we're going. Yeah, and I think part of that's the DM's responsibility, but part of it is definitely the player's responsibility. The DM does not, has, I guess, control per se of the game, but it's a story created by two people, or not two people, but
Two people.
Sometimes it's two people. I've had some. Yeah,
Yeah,
great one-on-one sessions, but yeah, created by the players and the DM,
yeah,
so they
everyone
work
has to
together on
be
that.
on equal grounds from the get-go. You have to understand that the DM is going to be doing a lot of explaining. You have to be understanding that the players are going to want to do a lot of things, but you guys need to agree that when it comes terms of like explaining things or how things happen, that the DM should say it rather than the players. Because I've had some times where the players would be like, they will actually explain what's happening as if they were the DM. Maybe they've DM'd other games and they want to bring it up here. Let's see what Drasty's bringing up. Worry that I bore people sometimes because there's a lack of reaction from the players online as compared to in real life. Yeah, that's definitely something I've experienced too. I will explain something thinking about it, like I'm super excited about it, but maybe I don't get the response because they're busy eating a sandwich or something, or they're just not paying attention at that time. And I guess it's your group, really finding out who's gonna sit down and take 3 hours out of their day to focus fully on it, rather than having the things happening in real life. But I guess it's kind of what we get into when we play online. It's like those type of things might happen, and we need to be understanding of that, and just kind of roll with the punches until we find our perfect group.
Yeah, I mean, part of online too, especially without visible cues, if you're not going to have cameras on or anything like that, you're definitely relying on purely audible, which is such a limited amount of communication we have as people. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced as a DM, I will describe something and it's just sort of silence. Like, okay, I guess I got to keep going, or what's going on? Yeah, I mean, I know. Sorry, I was just gonna say, I know in Drasty's game, I'm usually not bored. It's just pretty fun for me. It's early in the morning, so it's kind of hard to get up sometimes. But I'm having a lot of fun. It's just, yeah, I don't really know. Maybe if Drasty had a specific example, but yeah, a lot of stuff he has. He has a lot of big rooms, very large rooms with very large columns and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like with sorry, I had to hand batteries to my fiance. But yeah, with the gaming, like I started the community and I was like, okay, I want people on TeamSpeak more to show attendance and to see that we're actually playing, we're actually here. But now seeing how Roll20 kind of runs their thing, where they have cameras down there, I think that to be able to see someone's reaction and that is really important. So we might start to push maybe more towards Skype or something, maybe using some Skype or something. Yeah, Dress is talking about his columns.
Yeah, so many columns.
You can make an account
everywhere.
for your columns on Skype or something and have them.
I'm gonna start asking him. Sorry, I was gonna start asking him what kind of columns there are. I'll have like a list of like all of available column types that are made in the world. Is this a Pyrrhic column? Is this a, what kind of column is this?
Yeah. The whole thing with the webcam thing is kind of important. I've had people bring it up. Oh, let's use Skype. But I was worried about the whole TeamSpeak thing. But at this point, like, it's kind of like our community is a bit, it's in a stage of evolving, and I think that we need to have some meetings or get together and kind of maybe see if Skype is a good thing to use in tandem. I think that's the word to use, tandem with TeamSpeak and all that stuff. I don't want people to run too many programs on their computer at the same time, but I also want to see that they're active and that they're just not going to break away from us and I don't see them ever again. So I definitely like to talk with as many people as I can, and it does help with the RP experience to see someone's reaction and to see if they're just sitting there contently quiet or if they're sitting there angrily quiet.
Especially like gestures too. I mean, as a DM, sometimes I'm thinking to myself, like, I see Matt Mercer, who is a Critical Role TM, who is basically puts everyone to shame.
Yeah.
He's just 5-10 levels above anyone else, and it's wonderful to watch him, but it's also reminds you just like how much you have to work for. He uses his body a lot, and even if he's just doing sounds or sound effects with his voice, he uses his body to say, like, you do this, swing with your sword like that, or the thing like gets cut back. There's a lot of physical things that you can include in the online experience that might already be there if you're playing in real life. But it's another aspect of the game. I know I personally like having cameras up. Some people don't, and that's fine, but I think it's certainly another, just more cues to get people more involved and more, invested in the game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like, even just from that simple gesture of you swinging the sword, it does add a new feeling to playing the game. You can visualize it a bit better rather than, you swing your sword, like, so you can see me right now. Yeah, you swing your sword and you slice through the demon's chest, and it's just like, okay, thanks Bronzebeard. But instead, like, you swing your sword and you slice through the demon's chest, and blood spurts out, and like it's spraying in his eyes. He's like, ah, and you're like moving your face a lot and doing a lot of that stuff. I think it does. It should amp people up a bit more, hopefully, unless they're just like, nah, yes, okay, thank you. But
Yeah,
I think
I like the second one a lot better.
you like the second
Great.
one a lot better.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh, yes, sir, thank you. Wait, second one as in like the movement, or just
Oh yeah.
yeah.
No, just
definitely.
seeing the two differences, there was much more that I took just from the second one than the first one. It's not like you did that much, right? A couple gestures and just, that's it, yeah.
You just have to get comfortable with it, I think. That's because that's one thing. Like, I'm not doing many gestures right now. The only gestures I do is like move kind of around like this. But to have a webcam ready to go is another versatile tool that you can use. And just have to kind of be aware of where your hands are, I guess, because sometimes you can be doing movements down here and they don't see it, and it looks funny. But if you move up just a little bit, they'll be able to see, So,
It looks
all right,
funny,
see,
okay.
yeah. Well, you never know. You just see this, and you don't know what's going on down there. So,
Shake and wait.
yeah, shake weight. So Drasty's saying, yep, as a DM, I would love to actually gesture and show my players what I'm talking about with my hands and face, as I find trouble doing it with only my voice. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm realizing now. Now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I didn't do really any of that when we were playing, because I don't think, Extraordinary, you didn't see me doing any of that stuff, right, when we were playing?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you had a lot of stuff set up. Like, you had, like, your battle maps had, details and things like that. And I thought, description-wise, you, as well as I felt the players, put some description into things, which helped. Yeah, I know Roll20 does have a pretty solid web app. I've played a few games where everyone kind of brought a camera, essentially. Whether or not they use gestures, you still could see facial tics and expressions and cues. Gestures obviously help that, but yeah, just putting like your webcam up in Roll20 if you want, I think is really cool. And I'm thinking about trying to do that with my game. I'd love to be able to stream it. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. But I am going to update my computer because I bought Fallout 4 and I can't
I
play
bought it too, and I was playing it. The thing is, I've been losing sleep because of Fallout 4. Last
Good.
night I was like, hey, I should probably be asleep because I have to be at work early today, but I was like, yeah, start Fallout 4, let's load the last save game, and then I started playing it for like an hour or two extra that I should not have played, but it was a load of fun. They did a really good job with this one. It's like an upgraded version of Fallout 3. And there's so many different perks and stuff. It's just a really good game. I'm a huge fan of Bethesda. But yeah, back onto webcams and that. I definitely love using them now. Now that we were talking about this, it's getting me more excited for like the Steelborn Avatar playtests. And I think I'm going to try to get people to use webcams there too. Because that's going to be all about theater of mind and movements and gestures and that. And I think that's something we should include in our signups now. It's like, how into RP is it going to be? Are we going to use webcams? Maybe these are just like simple forms. Is this game going to use webcams? Is this going to focus on gestures and RP versus just like mechanics or whatever? Maybe it's going to be a mixture. I think that's something that would be interesting to try out to see if people would like that, or if people know about it. Like, getting comfortable with gestures and that, because it does completely change the feeling of things. Just from this little session we had here, I'm completely, like, my mind's going crazy, like, these many things could have happened,
Yeah, getting those ideas, getting those thoughts journey.
I think your Skype webcam paused or something. Because you're not moving anymore.
Yeah, maybe.
No. Yeah, you're just standing still looking unimpressed. Now you're moving. Okay, cool. Yeah. Whoa, what the hell? It's going really fast. It's catching up. There it goes. Okay, caught up.
Yeah, I opened up an Adobe Reader PDF, so we might have done something. That's the only thing I can imagine, because I hadn't done anything else.
That's gonna be awesome. That's recorded, so now you'll be able to see yourself fast forward like.
Great, love it.
Yep. All right.
Should
Well,
be,
I think we talked a good bit about the RP Sense things, and I think that it's got some ideas rolling for me in terms of like what I want to see and what's fun, and plus I do want to watch more of Matt Mercer. His name is Matt Mercer, right? From
Yep,
Critical Role?
Matt Mercer. Critical Role,
Sundry,
yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen like 2 of their games, and they have a really nice presentation of their games. They have like nice, like wherever they work, Geek and Sundry, I guess, whatever they have going on, they have a really bright work environment, and I would love to do something like that. That's so cool. They produce it so well. He's got a lot of nice drawings that he flips and has those 3D models and stuff that he uses, or the little miniatures. And the people seem to like it a lot, you know, the people who are playing it. And I would definitely like to be at that production value at some point, because they're doing really well. Or to at least, you know, meet them or play a game with them, you know. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, they're all professional voice actors, so, I mean, Matt Mercer, I think, is really great. Obviously, he's a really fantastic DM, but he, as players, they certainly give a lot to him. So it really helps that he's a great DM, and he also has really great players to work with, so they complement each other very well. I'm sure if he had a group of, you know, very laid back, very casual, very just not kind of involved people, I'm sure he would still be a good DM, but he would struggle, and watching that would be much less entertaining, because, you know, there's only one person really, I guess, trying or putting themselves out there in that way.
Now, what about Matt Mercer versus Chris Perkins?
Chris Perkins is very into the rule of cool, and everyone loves Chris Perkins, and I love him too. He's great. I don't know. I don't have anything bad to say about any of them.
Yeah, I mean, because I've watched more of Chris Perkins than I've ever watched of Matt Mercer. So, like, right now, I do really like how Chris Perkins DMs, and that's what got me into. I think I started watching Chris Perkins DMing for a lot of, like, you know, Robot Chicken and the whole team at Robot Chicken. He did like games for. He did games with a couple other people before then, and also, of course, the Acquisitions Incorporated. I watched a lot of those before I think I started up the community, and that kind of got me into, like, I want to play D&D again, and that was just from watching that. So I think that he does a really good job at that. I think that Matt Mercer might be a bit more active in the sense of, you know, body movements, because Chris Perkins does describe and do a lot of different voices, but I think that the players themselves probably, they don't actually, to be honest, now that I'm thinking of it, they don't do too much moving in Acquisitions Incorporated. And I'm guessing, I mean, not really. I haven't seen too much. They just move their pieces around and describe things.
Yeah, I mean, Acquisitions Incorporated is much more a bunch of guys having fun, really. You know, I think they're all, I'm not sure about all of them, but I know a couple of them at least have their own sort of entertainment media-wise. Like, I think one of them's a comedian, that sort of thing. But
well, they do the Arcade Comics, I believe. One of them's a writer.
Yeah.
One of them is the artist for it. I believe it's the guy who plays Jim Dark Magic. I think is the artist. I think. And then the guy who plays is it Owen or is it
Owen? I think so.
Yeah, he Jerry Owens, is it?
I don't know.
I don't remember his name. It's Jerry something, but he's the bald dude in the paladin armor all the time, and he's the one who writes for it, I believe. It's either or. Either Jim writes for it and Jerry does the art, or Jerry writes for it and Jim does the art, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? They just do Penny Arcade stuff. Then they have Viari now, who writes novels, and you know about that guy, right? You read some of his stuff, or you know about his stuff?
Yeah, the King Killer series. He's on his third one. I'm waiting for it. Yeah, that's when leans much more to the role play side of D&D. Yeah, Critical Role leans
Yeah.
much more to the role play side of it. Also, the people playing those characters, they're all voice actors, so they all have a voice for their character, and Mercer has voices for his NPCs.
I think we're gonna have to start training to become voice actors, so then we can at least become, if a little bit less great than Critical Role.
One thing I've noticed too is even if you're not a voice actor, just learning to change your mannerisms is enough. If you have, like, say you have an NPC and they only say what they absolutely need to say, and that's it. So a lot of their responses are okay. And maybe that's not that interactive, but that's not every NPC. But your players might be used to you kind of espousing on things or talking and that sort of thing. I know I ramble, but then they meet an NPC that's just like 3 words is the most they get. I mean, they're important 3 words, but it's like what? Or
I
just
think
having someone
that's
that's
really good to think about too, because I haven't thought about that. And I mean, I probably have thought about it, but not in the sense that you just brought up, like changing your mannerisms to get players to have different reactions to them, only saying a couple things. I would just explain how I'm explaining right now, how I'm talking. That's rambling. And like, I will ramble on and I will tell them too much information. I think it comes from experience, just playing games and seeing how much you give the players, seeing how much your characters act, or your players, sorry, my bad, but your NPCs act, compared to other players or seeing other players, how much information they will divulge, and if they will even talk to the players is another thing too, because they might be completely opposed to seeing a gnome or opposed to seeing an elf or something, and not even want to interact with them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to be quick about it, the way I try to do it is, like, sometimes I'll have NPCs that just are interested in something that the PCs probably aren't interested in. Like the NPC, is fascinated by squirrels or something like that. I'll go off and talk about squirrels, or they always end their sentence by a phrase, or when someone says something to them, they repeat that as a question. Just like different
Quirks.
cues and quirks and mannerisms that differentiate themselves. They might all have your same voice, but they're differentiated by how you're applying that voice.
One thing that I did do with a character that I've never done again, I don't know, for some reason I'm a huge fan of necromancers, but I had one old man who's basically the necromancer. He kind of shapeshifted into some older man. What's up?
Valen?
Yeah, he pretty much was him, but this was something that I ran with people in real life that had never played D&D before. It was the starting of creating that character, but what had happened was he was an old man who would always face towards people and have his hands folded behind his back like this, and he invited them into his cabin, which is like in the woods, like a random, just like little like stick hut type thing. He invited them in for dinner, and they sat down and they ate. Now, every time he would approach them, if the characters tried to get behind him, like in the sense to like backstab him or so, kind of like pickpocket him or something, his body would always be facing towards them. Like he would shift real quickly and like face towards them, and his mannerisms were a bit weird in the sense of he kind of talked real quick and was very polite to them. And so that completely changed who they had been talking to. So I think I did it in the past, but I think that over time I just kind of rambled on and kind of wanted people to be happy, and I should have really thought about the quality of what I was projecting to them. But yeah, that was just something I did in the past that I think that kind of changed the mannerism of what I normally did for characters. Yeah, so I mean, did you want to move into Kill It With Fire? Oh, you're typing stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I was typing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we'll move into our Kill It With Fire section where we talk about any type of monster or creature from the monster manual that we decide to talk about, or multiples of them, because there are a lot, and there are that are coming out in different homebrew releases and that.
I know you love Shadowfell. One thing that I love is vampires.
Oh yeah.
All the way from when I used to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer to 3 a.m. as like a 12-year-old kid. Just stay up late at night just to catch those double headers. So I mean, we can talk about them a little bit too, because I've wanted to include some in my campaign, and I think the way they're represented in the DMG is kind of sad. Or not sad, but just not the way I would personally represent them.
Yeah.
Unless you had someone else, different like monster or something that you thought would be interesting to talk about.
The thing is, like, vampires are such a staple in horror, as well as D&D lore. They've had vampires for a long time. And I mean, they're one of the biggest creatures, and they're super noble at some points in time. They're super feral in other points. But yeah, I mean, I originally in my campaigns have started people off with viewing vampires or being a vampire themselves or an altered vampire, maybe one of the lesser ones. So we can talk about vampires as well as what vampires turn people into, which I believe are vampire spawn.
Yep, the vampire spawn is generally what they'll say. They turn into kind of just thralls of a vampire that have like a semblance of its power.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, vampires. I have not read through the entirety of everything. I have a general overview of what a vampire is, and I really like their kind of, because we were talking about last week the lair actions and stuff like that. And vampires have like they're kind of centralized around that lair. So, but we can start off with like an overview of a vampire.
I think an overview. I'll do the overview if you want, just to kind of give you a sense. The way D&D dresses vampires is a very Nosferatu, which is what I consider the classic vampire. The vampire that comes to mind for a lot of people initially is the vampire that is killed by stake, doesn't like running water, sunlight burns the vampire. They have to sleep in their native soil. This also refers to Dracula too, which is probably the first popular media vampire as far as some sort of entertainment. There's a lot of weird rules that are applied to them that don't have a lot of explanation. Also, these vampires, turn to mist, turn to bats, turn into a wolf, call wolves. They of course have their charm. Whether you look into a vampire's eyes or vampires just are naturally charming based off kind of their unnatural state. That's sort of how the DMG roughly portrays vampires. Mechanically, obviously, all those things are in there, but that's the general overview of kind of how D&D represents vampires and which kind of vampires we're talking about. Because obviously, so many, like from Anne Rice to Dracula to Sparkly Twilight, Edward and the Sun, all those vampires have different rules, but a lot of times they'll be similar in certain aspects.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that little kid in the Little Vampire too. Like, don't they have those in D&D? Do you even know what that is? I don't even know if that's the name of the movie. The Little Vampire, the kid with the blonde hair who's a little tiny vampire. But either way, it kind of gets into the question I kind of wanted to ask you. Now, are there only evil vampires? Are there good vampires? Is there an ability to have a good vampire?
One thing about D&D is the aspect of turning it into a creature changes your alignment. I personally don't like that thought process. Obviously, the vampire with a soul, or the vampire who, is on this quest to redeem himself of his affliction, right? Because he is just so sad that he's a vampire. That's a trope. That's a very cliche thing that we can certainly use. But yeah, I don't think vampires should always be evil. I think some should certainly be altruistic, like benevolent monarchy even. Maybe there's a vampire that is like he's a benevolent monarch. He runs his kingdom. He runs it altruistically. He's the leader, but it's because he's the one with the power to deal with situations. But people trust him. That's a good vampire. Whether or not your PCs are we're gonna kill him because he's a vampire.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. He's not doing bad things. So.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a cool perspective on it, and I definitely agree. I'm not a huge fan of it changing your alignment. So, like, say someone got bit. Actually, I never even did that in my campaign. It was more of like you got bit by a vampire, you just turned into a vampire, in a sense, or had some sort of lingering effects. But I'm just a huge fan of that lair effect with a vampire. That they are all about that lair, whether it be a castle or some sort of just freaking coffin sitting somewhere, or a wooden coffin, or an ornate coffin, you know, with gems about it, or like gold all over it. And those regional effects that are really cool with it, you know, having the greater amount of those bats or wolves over there, like you were talking about, they can kind of turn into those type of things or call them to their aid. Different, I think the land kind of just like withers away and the plants die, and so like players walking into that area, you know, maybe having some background knowledge on vampires would be like, you know, they pick up a plant, it just like withers in their hand or just flakes away, and knowing that there's like fog all over the ground and you see a castle in the distance, it's just like, oh, you know, we need to be careful, there are vampires around here. And
Yeah, definitely.
That's just so cool with the vampires. And I have yet to get players to the point where they come to a vampire lair. But I know that when they reach, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when they reach 0 hit points, they turn into mist or something and float back to their resting place.
Yes. The way the mechanic works in D&D is, if the vampire, I think, let me see, missed the escape. When it drops to 0 hit points outside of wherever it rests, it just sort of auto-transforms into mist instead of, you know, going unconscious, doing death saves or things like that, and then goes to its resting place. If it can't transform, it's destroyed, and it can't turn to mist if it's in running water or sunlight. Those are how the mechanics are applied, you know, in the DMG, the D&D 5e.
Yeah. And I mean, the vampire itself is super powerful too. If we wanted to talk about just in general, I mean, how strong the vampire is. It's just challenge rating of 13. So, I mean, in there it's pretty high up, so you don't want to put it against super low levels, which I did. I put it against level 3s. But I didn't have them defeat it. I just had them kind of encounter it.
Are you talking about our session with Roger the Core?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much I was...
He asked for that. That was his fault if he died. I wanted you to kill him.
Yeah,
I was like, this vampire, if I was that vampire, I would smack that guy in the ground so far that no one would need to dig a hole.
Yeah.
I would punch him 6 feet under and walk away. He asked for it.
The thing is, he would have been able to kill all the people there. He could have killed the cleric. He could have killed the dude who let him out of the coffin, Absinthe. Just to know, because like I think that when he went into it thinking, I want to become a vampire, even not in a character sense, but as a player. Like he was like, I think it'll be cool to become a vampire, without actually knowing how painful it might be for transformation or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. So they're challenge rating of 13. They have a decently high natural armor of 16. So when you're lower level, I mean, trying to hit 16 is kind of hard. But I know you mentioned the running water thing and the sunlight thing. I think the running water thing, is that part of traditional vampire? Like
that's very Nosferatu. That's what I consider classic. Those weird rules, at least I consider them weird, that bind vampires. The whole stake to the heart. Like, why does a stake to the heart kill a vampire? Like, if the point is to stop its heart from pumping blood, which I could understand, like, I guess, you know, from an organic perspective, like scientific, I suppose, you know, why does it have to be a stake? Can't I just cut its heart out with a knife? So it's a weird rule, right? So yeah, that's definitely classic, you know, Nosferatu, Dracula vampire.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's paralyzed. It's not even killed. That's what it says in the DMG. Like, you paralyze it. You just stab it in the heart, it becomes paralyzed. So at that point in time, I think in traditional vampire stuff, I could be wrong. This could just be werewolves. But I thought you had to paralyze them by stabbing them in the heart with a stake and then slice their head off or something.
Yeah, in very old kind of traditional stuff, it was you stab them in the heart, they can't move anymore. You cut the head off. You fill the head with garlic. And I mean, I think you're supposed to burn the body after that or something like that, or you bury it was like the methods of like disposal after that were different. But I remember sometimes you would like bury them separately. Maybe you'd have to have a priest come and like consecrate it or whatever, or you would bury them in running water, or you would different things. But yeah, that was kind of a classic thing to do.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it was like you cut their body parts up and bury them separately in different areas so they can't reform or something weird like that. I think that's a lot of different lore with different creatures. They probably had something like that. But yeah, I mean, another thing that the main staple of what I've seen for vampire and what people have been worried about is like these legendary actions that they have of being able to do an unarmed strike, and instead of hitting you, grappling you, and then biting you. And like I think that is a fear that a lot of players have when you're facing up against a vampire, because they can pretty much turn you into a vampire or turn you into their slave.
hmm Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think mechanically they made vampires pretty cool. Being able to, maybe the vampire doesn't have actual swords, but the vampire is always trying to grab you and then, drink your blood kind of thing. And that's its main attack. And I think mechanically they did that very well. I like that. And most things that grapple in D&D grapple through just hitting you. It's not usually a grapple check like PCs versus another kind of NPC character. It's usually, or PC versus a monster, it's usually, you hit and you grapple automatically. But I think that's cool. I like how they did that.
Yeah, definitely. And then they of course have legendary.
I cannot hear you.
My bad. I was trying to mute mine so you didn't hear me going like okay, because I do respond to your stuff like okay, yes. But yeah, so I mean, they do have the legendary resistance as well, which I always forget to use on those characters. So vampires are super strong in the sense that they have that. So if you're trying to do anything against it, it can just auto succeed. And I know that it's like if you're trying to break out of its grapple, I mean, he can auto succeed on that. Correct? I believe so.
No, that's not a saving throw. I don't think so. Because it's a contested ability check, so mechanically it's not an auto succeed. But yeah, I mean, mechanically the vampire basically just makes unarmed attacks. If it hits, it grapples you automatically. After that, it bites you and basically heals for the amount of kind of damage in the bite. It also heals, an X amount of hit points every turn, unless certain applications are met. They can also charm, and the charm, I love how it's worded because it specifically says the charm target regards the vampire as a trusted friend to be heeded and protected. The target isn't under the vampire's control, like directly, but it takes the vampire's requests or actions in the most favorable way it can. And it's a willing target for the vampire's attack. So that basically says that so you can look and tell your PCs, like, listen, you're charmed, right? So if the vampire says, protect me, then, the most favorable course of action is to protect him. Don't just go off into the corner.
Vampire,
Yeah.
Instead of I'm just going to stand there and not hinder my party at all or run off like before the vampire can pretty much tell me to do things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so like Drasty's saying he loves legendary resistance. Yeah, legendary resistance is really, really cool with a lot of the creatures. But I want to talk about one thing in particular with the vampire weaknesses, and it's considered a flaw, but I think it's freaking cool in RP sense, and I have yet to use it. Forbiddance, which it says the vampire can't enter a residence without an invitation from one of its occupants. Now this relates to what we were talking about earlier with how you had a character become undead. Now I think that this would be cool to implement and pretty much not explain that a character is a vampire until you approach like some sort of residence and you guys all walk in and this creature's just standing outside the door and he has to be invited in or something. Like I think that would be a cool way to introduce that a character is a vampire, or he just hangs outside, It's like, no, yeah. I'm good, I'll just hang outside for a bit.
Yeah. It's another weird law, but I think rules of residence, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a TV show and Angel 2 did things like this where unnatural creatures and even magic users there were certain laws of entering a person's home. Say a magic user entered a person's home, they could still use magic, but at a much reduced level, because they entered forcibly and they were not invited. Now once you invite them in, they can come whenever they please and do whatever they please. But that's another rule, kind of, or interesting aspect that I think I would love to include in my games, with more things that aren't just vampires. But yeah, the thing with that's another classic name of the vampire. They have to be invited into your home.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I've looked at it every time I've used a vampire, and I've yet to use it. I think just because I didn't have the correct setup for it, or whenever a vampire appears, people are just like, oh crap, that's a vampire because your token looks like a vampire. And they would instantly...
Yeah, you've got this pale guy with veins ripping out his face and blood dripping. It's like, what is that guy?
I liked using cool artwork, but it would always be a vampire that's got blood dripping down his mouth, and it's just like, hey guys, you see this, person. I guess what I should do is find a token that looks like a normal person, but might be a bit more pale, and then find an actual vampire one where, maybe they actually show their fangs and attack someone, become hostile.
One thing in that aspect that I really want to do is I watch anime. I apologize, Broadsbeard, but there's some anime that I love, and Claymore is one of them. And in that, there's a very powerful, not vampire, but just powerful creature. And she essentially looks like a little girl. She just has a shift on, essentially. She looks like a 12-year-old, 10-year-old girl. And she kind of talks like that, not without intelligence, but just fairly innocently, fairly innocuously. And I thought of introducing a vampire into the campaign as basically this image, and that would be like the kind of token image I would use, because PC's seeing a girl would just like an innocent kid, girl, boy, whatever. It's like, oh, we gotta help her out, gotta protect her. And I mean, I thought of playing it as not that she's evil, but just that, she has her motivations, and part of her MO is siding with people that, not like revealing that she's a vampire. So in that aspect, like, she could do a lot of things, and kind of hide her identity.
Yeah, definitely. Is this an image from Claymore, that GIF that I have running under your webcam?
No, not at all. What is that?
It's from an anime. I don't know what anime it is, but I imagine that's like you inviting a vampire into your residence or something, or you see a vampire standing outside your house and he's just like staring.
Probably not an anime I would watch.
Probably not. But yeah, so sorry. That just reminded me of that when you said you watch it. But yeah, no, there are some. I mean, because I think there's one anime thing that I've actually watched. It was like a movie called Vampire Hunter D. Right? I think you know about that.
Yeah, it's a vampire. It's an anime. I don't think I've seen it, but yeah, I know it's an anime. It's got a couple of movies and a series.
Yeah, so I mean, I saw that and it was gory. I liked that about it. I mean, like people were getting their heads smashed and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, vampires.
Yeah. Like you were talking about, one thing that's really cool is the classic vampire has its lair. So a lot of people think about the Count in his castle, and he's got like vampire spawns that he has hanging out somewhere that kind of protect him. And like wolves are all about, there's larger wolves, and bats flying everywhere, and there's just this heavy mist. It's a very classic image when you think of a vampire's lair. And there's an older edition campaign, Ravenloft, that uses that to full effect, including the town, like the village people town that are afraid of the vampire, and they give the vampire, it takes like young women, or it takes just any kind of offering to feed it, as in exchange, the vampire basically just doesn't kill the entire town.
Have you
So-
seen The Strain?
No, I have not seen The
There's
Strain.
a TV show called The Strain that uses a lot of what has been explained, in vampire lore, and also what's listed in D&D. I mean, and what you just said, kind of like not killing the whole town. Now, in that show, like there is a vampire lord who is super old, and he decides to take, children from, this village overnight. Different children, they keep going missing, but he's not killing the whole town right away. And people know about him, and they kind of they're like, oh damn, my kids are gone, and he drinks the blood from the kids or whatever. And he's able to switch hosts. Now, I don't know if that's something vampires can do in like D&D, but if he's damaged or something, he's able to switch to a different host. And become, join a different body that's a bit more intact, and I've never had that come up in like a D&D sense. That's something, I don't know if that's traditional lore with vampires.
I don't think so.
That was
No.
interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. One thing I want to say about vampires is some of the rule sets they have. I know I would, I don't know, like if I was gonna run a vampire, one, I would change the rule set fairly drastically, just because I think that's something that people should learn as they deal with it. And it's one of the cool mechanic, learning a thing's weaknesses, and it's cool that vampire has weaknesses. But yeah, my vampires aren't going to need to sleep in native soil. They don't care about running water. Whether or not they burn in sunlight, I think I would just have that be whether the vampire is evil or not, right? Something along those lines. I think there's gods of the sun that are like lawful good, like Lathander, who would burn a vampire that came into his, sunlight, but wouldn't maybe burn one that was good as much. One thing I thought was cool was the stake to the heart. If the stake has to be living wood, I thought that would be interesting. So you have this village that lives near a vampire, and it's weird because the places that these villagers hang out, and you notice this as you walk into town, they always hang out around trees, living trees, and they have trees everywhere. Almost every house has a tree that's been grown recently, or the older houses have had trees that have been there for a long time, and that's because these people know that a living vampire, one of your biggest protections. Yeah, you rip this twig or this like branch off the tree and fend yourself because you need living wood. And I don't know how I would do that mechanically. Like, how long does it take for wood to die? But
what is considered the living wood? Like, is it green wood that is like recently broken out from a tree, or does it have to still be attached to the tree? Maybe you just like have the vampire impaled downward onto a tree itself or something, to that point. Another thing I want to bring up with vampires, because I was staring at this while we were talking, is the variants that they have for them. I think they're really cool, because I've never really thought of a vampire to have a great sword, or a vampire to have multiple spells like a wizard, in a sense. So like someone who was a wizard, or someone who was this great fighter, gets turned into a vampire and is that variant. I think those are really cool. They add those different things like the multi-attack with the great sword, or you get different spellcasting levels and cantrips. As those, I know it raises the challenge ratings, I think, of each one of those, especially the spellcaster gets pretty high up there as a 15, I believe. So 15 challenge rating, which is pretty high. But pretty cool. I think that makes like a vampire super versatile. You can use it in different areas, and then the subtlety that you mentioned of like the villagers living around living trees or whatever. If you have that ruling where it has to be living wood or whatever to pierce their heart, those subtleties, and not showing like the castle, or not showing the withering plant life or wolves. And so maybe there are wolves in the woods. But maybe you don't immediately connect it until you talk with some of the villagers, and they give you some little tidbits here and there. I think is really cool, and I think that I'm going to incorporate more subtlety now, talking with you in terms of your undead character, your example of the living wood type thing with the villagers. I think that adds a lot more fun of investigation into it. Someone who wants to, read more into things or study the land that you're actually traveling through as a character.
Yeah, it adds some flavor to your village. Your cast of characters. Maybe PCs just ignore it because they don't think it's important. But most people who play this game learn that if the DM says something, if it seems innocuous, there's a good chance it's something that's important. Sometimes it gets taken to a little bit of extreme, like the DM puts something like a statue, and then everyone spends like 20 minutes investigating the statue, and the DM's like, "Listen, guys, it's a statue, man. It's there for flavor. Yeah. Like, I don't have anything. It's a statue.
I want to pull on the statue's arm. I want to pull on the statue's leg." Yeah. I've had people. I mean, when I first started playing, there was a guy, and we kind of had little bits of different player aspects in each person, because we had a guy who wanted to investigate everything. Oh, I want to tear my shirt, wrap it around my feet, and all this other stuff because I want to make sure that I have bandages for later because I've played in D&D before. Then we've had other people who are like, "Man, you're taking way too long. This is just a simple task we need to go forward with," and all that. And mentioning the whole statue thing brings it up in my mind. But yeah, I mean, have you seen? Because this, I mean, we probably should get into our next segment, our final segment, which is the home brewery. Mm-hmm. Which we can still use the vampire as an example. Have you seen any other homebrew type stuff for a vampire around the internet?
Oh, you're gonna have me find it. 1 second. I didn't save this because I wasn't personally interested in it, but I had seen someone made a vampire prestige class. So let me bring that up here. Alright, that was a failure. Trying to find the one day ago. Okay. So this was his, hopefully, I think he wanted it to be his final draft. Let me bring it up and then I'll link it to you as long as it's what I was looking for.
Sure thing. You should be able to link it in the Twitch chat as well, because I don't think I have the bot on there to nuke those yet.
Okay. Okay, so I think this is what I was looking at.
Ooh, cool artwork too.
Oh, I tried to link it in chat, but the bot yelled at me.
Did it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Jeez. Crazy bot. I think people can always click on it and then they can view the link anyway.
Yeah, but this is a prestige class for, I guess, someone that is turned into a vampire. It's got a lot of different things here.
Oh, so this is actually like a player playing as a vampire in terms of like a starting class, correct?
I'm not sure if it's a starting class. It's a prestige class, and the way I think that worked in 3.5 was you leveled up to a certain point, and at that point you could take a prestige class, which was like an addendum to whatever class you picked originally. So you could be a mage vampire, a fighter vampire, a rogue vampire. It didn't necessarily have to fit your exact class, but it was an addendum, something you could add on to it.
That's really cool. I really like they have that kind of stuff, because you become something that is, additive to that rogue or additive to the ranger or whatever. A vampiric ranger, that'd be freaking cool to see. It just, that prestige or that Was it always called Prestige, or did they have other things? I think there wasn't there something when you hit level 21 or 11, there's different tier names for that? Is it similar to this?
I think those were epic levels.
Okay.
Or there were god levels. I've only played a tiny amount of Pathfinder, which is a sort of updated or abridged D&D 3.5.
Yeah.
It kind of, I guess, fixed a lot of issues that D&D had with that system. Especially when they moved on to 4E, and a lot of people didn't like 4E because it was vastly different. So, but yeah, this is basically, I think what it is like the prerequisites. You have to have a certain amount of constitution to survive the change. You have to be at least level 5. So you have to have done some things, be strong enough to handle this kind of change. And you endure a dark ritual, so that has this RP aspect of finding a vampire who will bring you into the ranks of vampirism. And basically in this prestige class you gain levels in this kind of vampire thing. So it would sort of be like multi-classing, I think. I don't think it is separate from your class levels. I think, like, say you're a fighter 10, you find this vampire, you turn into a vampire. When you level up to 11, you decide to take the vampire kind of multi-class, so you don't get your fighter level 10, level 11. But then if you go through all the vampire levels, obviously I'm sure you wanted something from that, so you get that, and then you go back to, your fighter stuff. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's really cool. I mean, it almost looked like, real quick, like when I glanced through it, that it was like a starting class. Yeah, to be level 5 in that and to move into that. To have these just additions to what is already created, I think, like, keeps games going, and that's why they have a lot of expansion packs for, like, with Legion coming out for World of Warcraft. I mean, you play the game for so long, it becomes old if you play it too often. And then adding these little homebrew things keeps you going a bit longer, and then people who come in later are like overwhelmed, of course, by all this stuff that's out there for it. But if they read from the beginning and on, they'll find that stuff was built, later on, but they'll have a bigger pool to choose from. So even people coming in later will play it for longer, I believe. So it's pretty cool to see this. It's like an entire thing, and they have artwork for everything for it. It looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you get some pretty big bonuses, especially later. Once you've taken 4 levels into it, you can increase either, strength, charisma, or intelligence to a maximum of 22, which is a very big increase. Yes. You get some spells as well, which, if you're not a spellcaster, maybe you want some of these things.
I mean,
they have auras in here.
Balanced?
I'm not sure about the balance, honestly. He, I think, has been working on this, so he's had a lot of feedback this is from Unearthed Arcana, the Reddit subreddit.
Okay.
So a lot of those guys give feedback on homebrew and stuff, so this being the final draft, or what he wants to be the final draft, I think he's tried to balance it as much as he can into the game. There's always going to be some issues, and even with, wizard approved content, there's balance issues.
Yeah, exactly. Like this.
But as long as it works in your game, and it fits with the things that are already set as far as rules, it's not too much of an issue. As a GM, you can look over this stuff and see, would I change stuff? For me, I look at stuff, and then I really just need to see it in game. Like, I need to see what people do with it.
It's all about the playtest, I think, with all the homebrew content, no matter what it is. I think it's really just sitting down and seeing how it's used, especially with the mechanic-heavy players, see how it's kind of abused, and then you can alter it from there. So I definitely would be interested to see if this prestige class has been tested, and see if there's any addendums to it. Is this the newest thing that they've had linked for it, for the vampire thing? Is there
he brought it up a day ago, so he's been working on it.
So it's still active. That's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why I'm acting surprised like it's still active. I haven't like looked at this separately, but yeah, no, that's really cool. I'm glad that there's so many people out there that have the ability to do this kind of stuff, because there's so much information you need to know, or so much information you need to build on top of your previous knowledge, I guess, to create these type of things, like what Vindic does, with the homebrew creatures and that. It's just so much stuff, and one person can't do everything, so to see this come out, it's just like a nice little added bonus that you didn't have to work on, but you can still use,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I don't know. There's so much I want to do in this game. Like so many of these homebrews and stuff I want to play.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, time is really important nowadays, and that's why I stopped running normal games, which is kind of sad because I see all this stuff coming out for it now, and the new Shattered Coast, I think it was, that came out. I think we were talking about it last week. That came out, and now they've got like the couple editions there. And I've seen all the stuff for 4th edition that came out, all those different classes, all those different races. And I came into 4th edition like late in the game where everything was released, and I was like, man, there's so much stuff in here. There's shard mines, there's all this craziness going on, and I felt like there was so much stuff, but everyone hated the mechanics. And so that's why I waited for 5. And now to see the actual process of things and to see all this homebrew coming out with it, there's an interesting perspective on the whole developmental process in the Dungeons and Dragons universe.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of stuff coming out, and yeah, I mean, one thing too is sometimes it's hard to find a DM that'll let you do this and like trust that you're not trying to break their game.
Yeah.
Which I try my hardest. Like I'm not like a game breaker. Like I'm decent at video games and things like that, but I'm not like the mindset of like Rusty, who is a very mechanic heavy person and is definitely the person that'll spend hours of time figuring out the perfect character, and his entire 1 to 20 and how many multi-classes he's taking and how these mechanics works. Like I can do that to an extent, but really I just want to have fun. Like, sometimes you just want to be a vampire, you want to be a werewolf, or you want to be a magic gunslinging skeleton.
Yeah, I think that Rusty in our community played gunslinging skeleton, I believe, right? I think
one of our someone was starting to DM Vindic actually, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll let all the homebrew in that you guys want," and Rusty came in and basically made this magic skeleton. Was a gunslinging skeleton, and he wasn't even the worst. The worst were these dog archons.
Yeah. Doge.
The dogs. The heavenly dogs that didn't need to eat or sleep, and were like just they like a racial bonus was like +2 to AC. Like it was just insane. The homebrew for that was not in any way balanced.
I heard them all the time just talking about Doge this, Doge that, and they were like, they had an actual image of like that dog with like paladin armor or something, and I was just looking at it going like, wow, I let a lot of stuff slide in my game, but to see that kind of stuff, like, yeah, it's cool that there's homebrew for it, but that's like the extent of the internet. Like you get to the end of the internet and you reach that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You find the Doge Knight.
You find the Doge Knight. Yeah, but
or does the Doge Knight find you? I mean,
I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe they're gonna make an entire D&D race, and that can set up with the Doge, or maybe they'll have a selfie stick as an item in the game or something that you'll be able to use.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we could talk about homebrew for a while, but I mean, I think that's enough on in terms of that. I mean, we're reaching the end of our show here. Does anyone in chat, meaning Drasty, because I think he's the only one here, Drasty, do you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything like that? Something you want to see on next Saturday's session?
Hey Drasty, Gabriel wants to be a vampire, so if I can use this homebrew for the next 5 levels, that'd be great. Then I'll actually have spells. I always joke about my character in this game. Like, alright guys, I got all my spells back, and I don't have any spells. I don't know what magic is.
Alrighty, well, we're going to end this episode here. Thanks for watching, and we'll upload this shortly. Make sure to follow us on Twitter if you haven't at The Steelborn. Follow Extraordinary on Twitter at Extraordinary. And then you could shoot us a like on Facebook over at facebook.com/Steelborn. But yeah, again, guys, thank you for watching. Thanks for following, and hopefully we'll see more of you on the next one. Have a good one.